This is the Black Information Network Daily Podcast, and I'm your host, Ramses Ja. And sometimes the amount of stories that make their way to us means that we simply can't cover everything that comes our way. But from time to time, a story just stays with me, and I feel compelled to share it with you and give you my thoughts. And now, one more thing.
I got one more thing I'd like to talk to you about right now.
Okay, so today I would like to once again talk to you about artificial intelligence, AI. Now, if you're a longtime listener of the show, you know that we've touched on some of the biases found in artificial intelligence and how representation in the tech industry could go a long way, especially as AI continues to develop and take shape. Today, we're going to cite an example of exactly how important the data that is fed into the artificial intelligence models, we're going to see how important that is and how it can shape outcomes. So again, at present, we've seen biases in the way resumes are sorted, the way tenants are selected for housing, for mortgage applications, educational opportunities, how we're represented as a people, how medicine is practiced. That list goes on and on. In fact, I want to read a quote from the ACLU. It states, there is ample evidence of the discriminatory harm that AI tools can cause to already marginalized groups. After all, AI is built by humans and deployed in systems and institutions that have been marked by entrenched discrimination, from the criminal legal system to housing to the workplace to our financial systems. Bias is often baked into the outcomes the AI is asked to predict. Likewise, bias is used in the data used to train the AI, data that is often discriminatory or unrepresentative for the people of color, women, or other marginalized groups, and can rear its head throughout the AI's design, development, implementation, and use. The tech industry's lack of representation of people who understand and can work to address the potential harms of these technologies only exacerbates this problem. And I think that sums it up nicely. But I want to make that live just a little bit more. So this week, our producer Chris sent an article to me from Level. It was written by Omar Gallagher. And in the article, there's an 18-year-old from Virginia named Emily Ocasio, and she made her own AI software to prove that local media in Boston dehumanized Black homicide victims in their crime coverage. Okay. And I want to take a moment here. The Boston Globe, I've interacted with the Boston Globe, and part of this story has to do with the Boston Globe. I've also interacted with one of their subsidiaries, the Emancipator, and I believe them to be, the Emancipator in particular, to be a wonderful organization. Obviously, it's highlights Black stories, like we do here on the Black Information Network. The Boston Globe, I'm less familiar with, but I don't want this to be a reflection of them. Rather, I'd like this to be a reflection of the entirety of media coverage, them included, because historically there has been biases against Black and brown people. And indeed now these biases still exist, perhaps unknowingly. I feel like we're living through sort of an enlightenment period where a lot of things are coming to light and we're having to address them and have really tough conversations about things that we were doing and harm that we were perpetuating that we weren't aware of. So, Emily Ocasio used her software, her AI software, to analyze 5,042 cases as far back as the 70s to determine if the Boston Globe published additional information about Black homicide victims beyond just statistics. And the result of her study is that she found that Black men under 18 were 30% less likely to get humanizing coverage, and Black women were 23% less likely to get it in the news stories. And the article I was reading suggests that this echoes a 2020 study published in the American Sociological Association, which showed that homicides in predominantly Black neighborhoods received less news coverage than those occurring in white neighborhoods, which checks out. It checks out according to my experience living here, and I'm sure many other Black people. Furthermore, the coverage of the murders in Black areas was less likely to portray victims as complex human beings. And that's a direct quote from the 2020 study from the American Sociological Association. The study was based on all print and digital coverage of homicides in Chicago for the year 2016. And then finally, Hispanic homicide victims in the same study they also got less coverage than white victims, who were twice as likely to be discussed in terms of their relationships and their roles in the community. And that year in Chicago, there were 765 murders. So what we have here is a situation where now AI is being used to identify the very same prejudices and data sets that are being used in the algorithms tasked with identifying likely criminals, criminal behavior, and ultimately discriminating against those with criminal histories. But it doesn't stop there. AI is also being used to dehumanize Black stories, or, depending on how you look at it, overly humanize white stories. And so by having Emily Ocasio turn AI on its head to find out how media coverage in the past has portrayed Black victims relative to white victims and Hispanic victims relative to white victims. And then knowing the way AI works, how it draws from humans' methods and recounts and experience of the world, knowing that in the media, Black people are less humanized, there's less empathy, that they're not talked about in terms of their role in the community as frequently and so forth. With that data set being used to inform AI models, you start to see how AI models will adopt a similar posture with respect to Black and brown people. And now you get to see how these outcomes are shaped with resumes, with tenant selection, mortgage qualification, so forth. Another brief example is I came across a study that suggested that a company was looking for certain applicants for a position. And they tasked AI with sorting through the resumes. So AI looked back at people who were hired already and found some commonalities, a certain frequency within the data set of folks that had already been hired, and tried to mimic that in sorting resumes. And what the AI discovered, this is all working underneath the hood. So there's no human involvement, no human interaction, but indeed the human biases and the human prejudices are very much there. What the AI discovered is that folks who were playing lacrosse got a favorable bump if their application listed that they played lacrosse. Folks named Chet, folks that came from privileged backgrounds where these sorts of things were more prominent, because those are the types of people who had been hired in the past. It prioritized those resumes over other indeed qualified individuals, not just Black people, but women as well, because there's no women named Chet. Well, maybe, but you get my point. And it doesn't matter if you're an all-star, basketball player, all-star football player. Lacrosse was what the AI model was looking for. And so you start to see that you can't just throw your hands up at something like this and say, okay, this is the great equalizer. This is a vicious cycle, can be a vicious cycle if we don't get in front of it. It can be a snake eating its own tail. And at the end of the day, my belief is that we stand to lose the most. So we need to remain vigilant, and we need to speak up when and where possible and make sure that we are counted and accurately depicted in our fullness as a people as AI continues to take center stage in this country. Now, as always, I open the floor to you. What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear them. You can share them with me using the red microphone talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app. And of course, you can reach out to me on all social media at Ramses Ja. And when you do, we'll talk then. All right? Peace. This has been a production of the Black Information Network. Today's show is produced by Chris Thompson. Have some thoughts you'd like to share? Use the red microphone talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app. While you're there, be sure to hit subscribe and download all of our episodes. I am your host, Ramses Ja, on all social media. Join us tomorrow as we share our news with our voice from our perspective, right here on the Black Information Network Daily Podcast.